What is up, righteous people? Derek here from Bomb Sucks, finishing off a week of Bomb Bites where we feast upon the words of Christ, one bite at a time. So what do you think of when you think of the word Zion? Okay, there's a lot of stuff out there. So you can think of this guy, you can think of Zion Williamson, you can think of the park that you're going hiking in southern Utah. There's a lot of different things. Well, Zion in the Guide to the Scriptures, it says, the pure in heart, which is section 97, verse 21. Zion also means a place where the pure in heart live. It's the city built by Enoch and his people that eventually was taken into heaven because of righteousness, and it was named Zion. Now you remember, we talked about this way back in section 38. Here's Enoch in his city. So he talked about how the Lord called his people Zion because they're of one heart and one mind, dwelt in righteousness. There was no poor among them. That's what the Lord has always wanted with his people. He's always wanted to build Zion with them. That's why back in section 38 where it says, I am the same which took the Zion of Enoch into my own bosom. He's not just flexing. He's like, I did it with them and I can do it for you. He's always wanted that for his people because he wants to prepare his children for the celestial kingdom. Section 105 verse 5 has a great statement about Zion. It reads, and Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principles of the law of the celestial kingdom. Otherwise, I cannot receive her unto myself. That's why Zion has got to be a pure people so they can be prepared for the celestial kingdom. Also with Zion, what else do you think of? In the latter days, a city named Zion will be built near Jackson County, Missouri. The saints are counseled to build up Zion wherever they are living in the world. And this is a great statement. So in section 57 of the Doctrine and Covenants, now keeping in mind that the context here is Lehman Copley had given up his property. He'd given up his property to the saints from Colesville, New York that came over. And then at the end, he was just kidding. He didn't want to follow law of consecration, left the church, went back to the Shakers. So the Colesville saints do not have anywhere to go. So what does the Lord do? He sends them 900 miles to start building up Zion. These are great people. Edward Partridge's family and many others, they came over here to start building up Zion. Now, when they got here, they're all looking around. In fact, Joseph himself was looking around. If you go to Saints, it's the chapter called After Much Tribulation. This is kind of what happens when the saints get there. It says, as they neared Jackson County, the men admired the gently rolling prairie around them. With plenty of land for the saints to spread out, Missouri seemed like an ideal location for Zion. And Independence, with his proximity to the large river and Indian lands, could be a perfect place to gather God's covenant people. But when they reached the town, the elders were unimpressed by what they saw. Ezra Booth, a former minister who had joined the church after seeing Joseph heal a woman's paralyzed arm, thought the area looked dreary and undeveloped. It had a courthouse, a few stores, several log houses, and little else. The missionaries had baptized only a handful of people in the area, and so the branch was not as strong as Joseph had expected. Feeling misled, Ezra and others began to question Joseph's prophetic gifts. Joseph was disappointed too. Fayette and Kirtland were small villages, but Independence was little more than a backwater trading post. The town was a point of departure for trails going west, so it drew fur trappers and teamsters along with farmers and small businessmen. Joseph had known people in most of these trades all his life, but he found the men in Independence especially godless and rough. What's more, government agents in the town were suspicious of the missionaries and would likely make preaching to the Indians difficult, if not impossible. Discouraged, he took his concerns to the Lord. When will the wilderness blossom as a rose? He asked. When will Zion be built up in her glory, and where will thy temple stand? Well, July 20th, 6 days after his arrival, Joseph's prayers were answered. And this is where you get section 57 of the Doctrine and Covenants, where in the section heading it says those same questions. When will the wilderness blossom as a rose? When will Zion be built up in her glory, and where will thy temple stand? So I guess the question is, how do you get a rose to blossom in a wilderness desert? Well, in section 57, and this is kind of just an overview of Zion and what's going to be happening over the next several sections, you look at these verses here. Verse 8, verse 11, verse 14, and verse 15 all have a common word. If you look at verse 8, it talks about Sidney Gilbert. It says, verily let my servant Sidney Gilbert plant himself in this place and establish a store that he may sell goods without fraud, that he may obtain money to buy land for all of the saints, that he may obtain whatsoever things the disciples may need to plant them in their inheritance. Verse number 11, and again, verily I say unto you, my servant William W. Phelps, we talked about him earlier this week, be planted in this place and be established as a printer into the church. Verse 14, and thus let those whom I have spoken be planted in the land of Zion, as speedily as can be with their families, to do those things even as I have spoken. And then verse 15, now concerning the gathering, which there's a lot about the gathering. Let the bishop and the agent make preparations for those families which have been commanded to come to this land as soon as possible and plant them in their inheritance. So hopefully you saw an interesting word in all of these verses, and the word is plant. So to plant means to place something where it will grow. So what do you have to do to land that is rough, rugged, and unprepared to plant and harvest both roses and temples? Well, think about in church history some of the things that happened in Missouri. This was a proving ground. This is a tough time for saints. But in order for you to grow things, sometimes it takes cultivation. It takes digging into that soil. So this is a tough time for the saints. Elder D. Todd Christofferson talked about this when he said, Zion is Zion because of the character, attributes, and faithfulness of her citizens. Remember, the Lord called his people Zion because they are of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. If we would establish Zion in our homes, branches, wards, and stakes, we must rise to this standard. It will be necessary, 1, to become unified in one heart and one mind, 2, to become individually and collectively a holy people, holy and consecrated, 3, to care for the poor and the needy with such effectiveness that we eliminate poverty among us. We cannot wait until Zion comes for those things to happen. Zion will only come as they happen. So remembering also that the saints are counseled to build up Zion wherever they're living in the world. And so that's where we have these stakes of Zion that we've been talking about. I live in the Clinton, Utah West Stake of Zion. There's people out there who live in various parts of Zion, all trying to build up the kingdom. So you're going to see over this next little while how the saints, as they plant themselves, that planting and that digging it's a difficult thing, but as they're doing that, that's how they are able to build this area up and get a temple ready there. And it's very, very interesting to see how the Lord works with his children as they try to build up Zion back in Jackson County, Missouri, and also in our lives as well. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for a great week of gospel study. We will see you next week with sections 58 and 59. Godspeed. Bye-bye.